Okay, everybody, we're just waiting on one more to join. We'll be right back with you. Sorry for the delay. Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Medical Board of California Panel A online meeting this morning. Just have some meeting formats and procedures to start with, and we will go ahead and I'll turn the meeting over to the chair in just a few moments here. Being that this is a WebEx meeting, though, we just have a few instructions to give out in the beginning. So we'll be taking roll call for participants for each oral argument at the start of each agenda item, just to make sure that everybody is with us before we do go on record and start the proceedings. So we ask that everybody who's right now in the attendee mode, you won't be able to speak until we do move you up as a panelist when your case is heard. Once all the panelists are present, the administrative law judge will go ahead and take over and conduct the oral argument. When the oral arguments have concluded, we will be allocating 30 minutes of time to do the closed session deliberation. What that will mean is during the closed session, much like when people have to leave the room during a physical meeting, we will actually have to have everybody leave the online meeting. And before we have you leave the online meeting, we will announce what time to return. And during that time that the meeting is in closed session, if you try to return to the meeting, you will get a message saying that the meeting is locked. I have the WebEx event is locked. The host has restricted access to the event to those who are currently in attendance. We are going to stay on a very tight time schedule to make sure that the time that we announce is the time that we reopen the meeting so that you're able to rejoin the meeting for the next oral argument. You'll be able to use the same link from the top of the agenda that you used to join this time. So again, at the time that we announce, you just go back to that agenda, click on the link again, and you will be able to rejoin at that time. And as I mentioned, we will be keeping a very close time schedule. I'll be announcing to the deliberators as time lapses to make sure that we are back at the time that we announce. So there will be no public comment during this meeting. And again, all attendees are unable to mute themselves unless they are promoted to the panelist role, which I will be doing as we call each case. So with that done, I will turn it over to the chair, Dr. Lewis, so he can go ahead and introduce himself and begin the meeting. Thank you.
Me now? Hello?
Yes, Dr. Lewis.
Oh, good.
Yes, Dr. Lewis, we can hear you. Go ahead.
I'm going to call to order the Panel A online meeting of the Medical Board of California. I am Ronald H. Lewis, MD, the chair of Panel A. The first order of business will be to establish a quorum, and we will do this by calling roll. When you hear your name, hear your name, signify by saying aye. as you unmute yourself and then go back to mute again. So let's have the quorum established. So could you please call roll?
Dr. Lewis,
Present.
Dr. Hawkins, Ms. Lubiano, Ms. Formal,
Present.
Ms. Lubiano, Ms. Lubiano.
Will
Can
you
you hear me? Yes.
Yeah.
Hello? Mr. Watkins,
Here. Can you hear me? Here.
Dr. Yip,
Dr. Yip here.
we have a quorum.
Okay, you turn it back over to me. Okay, the quorum has now been established. I want to say that we all appreciate your patience on this maiden voyage of this virtual meeting. So hopefully from now on it'll be smooth sailing, but do remember that this is the first time we've tried this, or there may be an occasional glitch. Okay, Sean, who you just heard from, will be the timekeeper and will keep us on schedule since we have a very full agenda today. I'm going to now ask that every time that you want to speak, you state your name for the court reporter, since she cannot see you physically. So I'm going to turn the meeting of the open session over to Judge Corin Wong to guide us through the open session of this Panel A meeting. Judge Wong.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. So, Madam Court Reporter, if we could go ahead and go on the record. So
Judge Wong, can I step in real quick?
Sure.
Mary Kate, is there an announcement you had to make?
No?
Okay. Mary Kate's headset isn't working, so I need her to get on another. I'm sorry, there's a microphone issue here.
You want me to go off mute, Sean?
Sorry, we're live here, Dr. Lewis.
So,
I just wanted to ensure that we had given enough time, as this was our first roll call, to ensure that all of the members were here. So we have Dr. Lewis,
yes.
Dr. Hawkins, Ms.
Yes.
Lubiano, Mr. Warmith,
Here.
Yes.
Mr. Watkins,
Yes, present.
and Dr. Yip.
Dr. Yip here.
Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Wong, the floor is yours. Ms.
Okay, so,
Judge Wong. I'm calling you Dr. Wong. It's Judge Wong.
thank you. Not a problem. So let's go ahead and go back on the record. We are on the record before the Medical Board of California, Department of Consumer Affairs, State of California, in the matter of the petition for penalty relief of Zachary King Cosgrove, MD. That's MBC number 800-2018-042-126, OAH number 2020-040-349. My name's Corin Wong. I'm an administrative the Office of Administrative Hearings. This is the date and time set for oral argument in the notice of hearing for oral argument in light of Governor Newsom's Executive Order N-29-20 dated March 17th, 2020. Oral argument is being held as a web event And it looks like just the court reporter and I are appearing by video with everyone connecting by audio only. So even though we did just establish a quorum, I do need to establish a quorum for the record. And again, since the panel members do not have their cameras on, I ask that each panel answer audibly after I call his or her name. So Dr. Lewis.
Dr. Lewis, you'll have to unmute to respond.
Yes, present.
Okay. Dr. Hawkins.
Here.
Ms. Lubiano.
Here.
Mr. Wormoth.
Here.
Mr. Watkins.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Dr. Yip.
Here.
Thank you, and let the record reflect that a quorum is established. Next, I'll ask that the attorneys state and spell their names for the record, starting with the Deputy Attorney General.
Judge Wong, I need to go ahead and promote now all of the individuals involved with this case. So if you give me just 1 minute, I will bring them on.
Of course.
Brian Roberts, Dag, you're now in. Mr. Lear, you are now in. And Mr. Cosgrove, Dr. Cosgrove, you are now in. So you are all able now to unmute your mics and speak freely as Judge Wong calls upon you. Please continue, Judge Wong.
Thank you. So again, if I could have the attorneys state and spell their names for the record, starting with the Deputy Attorney General.
Thank you. Good morning. Brian Roberts here on behalf of the Attorney General and the people of the state of California. That's BRIAN ROBERTS. Thank you.
And Mr. Lear, if I could have you unmute and state and spell your name for the record, please.
Mr. Lear, you're on mute. Your microphone button is the bottom left button. If it's red, that means you're still on mute. There you go.
Thank you for that. Edward Lear on behalf of Dr. Cosgrove, who is also on the feed, and my name is spelled EDWARD, Lear, LEAR.
Okay, thank you. And I see Mr. Roberts and Mr. Lear that you have connected by video, so I will note that for the record. And it looks like Dr. Lear is by audio only. Is that correct, Mr. Lear? Or excuse me, Dr. Cosgrove.
Dr. Cosgrove appears to be by video. I'm sorry, by audio only.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so the board in this matter has issued an order of non-adoption of a proposed decision by an administrative law judge and has decided to determine the matter itself. The board has requested oral arguments and has expressly limited oral argument in this matter to the question of whether the proposed penalty should be modified. The following process and time limitations will apply. Respondent will have 15 minutes to make an opening argument, or I should say Mr. Lear will have 15 minutes to make a opening argument, and then the Deputy Attorney General will have 15 minutes for a response, followed by Mr. Lear having 5 minutes for closing arguments, followed by the Deputy Attorney General having 5 minutes for closing. These time limits will be strictly enforced. I'd like to remind the parties that arguments shall be limited only to the existing record and shall not exceed the scope of the record of duly admitted evidence. No new evidence will be heard. The panel members may ask questions of the parties to clarify the arguments, but should not ask questions that elicit new evidence. I or any panel member may ask a party to support the party's argument by a specific citation to a specific part of the record. At the end of oral arguments by counsel, I will offer Dr. Cosgrove an opportunity to address the panel regarding the penalty. If he elects to address the panel, I will place him under oath, and he will have no more than 5 minutes to address the panel. And this is optional. He has the right to do it, but it's certainly not required that he do so. And then finally, after our oral argument, the board will go into closed session to deliberate. So a decision will not be issued today, but will be issued sometime in the future. Oral arguments are being recorded stenographically by a court reporter who, of course, is at a different location than the speakers. Therefore, it's important that everyone identify himself or herself each time before speaking, and that they speak slowly and clearly. It's requested that you mute your microphone when not speaking, and of course, remember to unmute it just before speaking. And also, if you could keep in mind that the rustling of papers will pick up on the microphone and cause interference. And again, I want to remind the parties that arguments must be based on the existing record and no new evidence will be heard. Additionally, had the benefit of receiving and reading the parties' briefs, so that should be kept in mind as well. So with that, Mr. Lear, you may begin.
Thank you, this case has been going on for a while, as you could all see from the procedural record. Most importantly, and the most important date for all to be aware of is December 7th, 2006. That was the date that Dr. Cosgrove was arrested in Rancho Mirage. But more importantly, for the purposes of this hearing, that is the date that he stopped using drugs and has been sober since then. That is going on 14 years, and it's a significant period of time. It was deemed significant, certainly by Judge Garrett in the hearing that we had before her, where Dr. Cosgrove was reinstated with the conditions of probation that are at issue today. So what we're not here to talk about today is whether he qualifies for reinstatement. He clearly does. That's been adjudicated. And as the panel and board is aware, Dr. Cosgrove has been practicing medicine and he's been doing great. He's been doing so great that he was deemed to be somebody that no longer has to be on probation and no longer has to be subject to the probation conditions. That's why we're here today. And in that regard, the argument from the board is essentially that that monitoring needs to continue to take place and that Dr. Cosgrove should continue to be on probation. That is belied by the evidence. To wit, there was testimony from, amongst others, Ms. Dvorak at the trial. Ms. Dvorak is with the medical board's probation unit, and she was subpoenaed to come in, and she testified unequivocally that Dr. Cosgrove no longer needs to be on probation. He doesn't benefit from that, nor do the people of the state of California benefit from that. And in that regard, I cite you all to the record where Ms. Dvorak identified that, one, Dr. Cosgrove has never had a positive result on his biological fluid testing, and then further opined that there was no reason for Dr. Cosgrove to continue being on probation. That's from the medical board itself. And we find that to be the most compelling of all the evidence that was provided, and so did Judge Garrett. Dr. Cosgrove testified, I'm looking to page 67 of the transcript, that his sobriety is inherent in who he is today, that he maintains his sobriety just based upon his self-discipline. That is exactly what the goal was out of the entirety of this process, and that is exactly what has happened. He further opined on page 68 that he did not think it was required for him to remain, to continue with counseling or therapy, for him to be emotionally stable and continue his emotional stability. Again, That was and is the goal of any probation. And Dr. Cosgrove epitomizes the successful product of the probationary conditions to which he was subject for the 4 years for which he was on probation. This is the goal. The goal is to help somebody like Dr. Cosgrove through probation conditions get to where he is today. To wit, he is somebody who is emotionally stable on his own. He's somebody who is sober on his own and is not somebody that needs any probationary conditions on a future going basis. The board may be aware from the record that Dr. Cosgrove is currently practicing in Bakersfield. There was testimony in the record from character reference letters about how well he is doing. The board may further be aware from the record that Dr. Cosgrove's family resides in Texas. And a big motive for Dr. Cosgrove being off probation is so that he can move from California to Texas in order to practice medicine in Texas. In order to qualify to be a Texas practitioner, it's critical that he be off of probation in California. That's what's underlying this great effort. So there are two things underlying it. One, he no longer needs the counseling, the therapy, the biological testing to which he's been subject. But two, and I'm not even sure it's two, it's probably more of a 1A, he wants to be with his family. And he's been apart from his family for 4 years. Again, grateful that he's practicing and has the privilege of practicing medicine. Very grateful about that. But nevertheless, he would like to go back to Texas to be with his family unit. That's what's driving us. And so in that regard, we believe that we've met the burden. We met the burden, one, for reinstatement, obviously. Two, we met the burden in front of Judge Garrett for eliminating the probationary conditions. And three, we don't think that there's any compelling argument from the medical board as we go down the line that Dr. Cosgrove should not be able to be off of probation because essentially he's earned it. He's earned the right. He's done great. He's had almost 14 years of sobriety. And that is as compelling as anything probably most of us have seen in regard to these proceedings. That's a long time. And so for those reasons, we submit that Dr. Cosgrove should, one, be off of probation, two, that Judge Garrett, an experienced judge, got it right, that unlike what the medical board stated in its brief, her conclusion was not based on pure speculation. Rather, she considered the evidence. She considered the evidence, the testimony from Dr. Dvorak. She considered all of the paperwork that we submitted, including from Dr. Cosgrove's peers with whom he works, about the way that he is leading a stable, normal life and is worthy of being able to practice without being on probation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lear. Mr. Roberts, you may begin with your argument.
Thank you. So it is my position that the decision in this case does need to be modified, and that is that the petition for early termination should be denied. The respondent has not met his burden of proving rehabilitation, and he still presents a danger to public safety. First, one of the factors that must be considered when determining whether to reinstate a license or terminate probation early is the nature and severity of the acts and crimes here. And the nature and severity of the acts here cannot be overstated. The misconduct here is that the doctor was involved with 3 different female patients in a sexual relationship. Not 1, not 2, but 3 separate female patients. And that alone in itself is very, very severe misconduct. But that is not it. In addition to the sexual relationships, all 3 of those relationships also involved some sort of type of violence. In 2 of those instances, there was physical domestic violence. One, the doctor kicked and punched one of the female patients. In another, he roughly grabbed a female patient by the arm and threw a dangerous object at her, causing physical injury. And then the third episode involved threats and witness intimidation. In fact, the quote was, he told the patient, "You better kill yourself because that's going to hurt less than what I'm going to do." This is very, very serious conduct, very egregious conduct. And the case law is very clear: when acts of misconduct involve a high degree of moral turpitude, the proof of reform has to be overwhelming. And here, while Dr. Cosgrove has provided proof that he has shown some reform and some rehabilitation, the proof here is not overwhelming. All we have here is that he has merely complied with probation, that he's done what's been asked of him. He's done nothing more than that. He's not gone above or beyond his probation terms. He's not shown any further steps of independent reform outside of his probation that he has done to rehabilitate himself or reform himself. Thus, I think it is clear from the evidence that he has not met the clear and convincing standard that is required, let alone the overwhelming proof that is required due to the high degree of moral turpitude involved in this case. And in fact, I think also his attitude towards his reform and his rehabilitation is very naive in certain respects. The respondent has no plans to continue his sobriety beyond what he testified at the hearing, other than just his own self-discipline, his own self-will. And while he has maintained sobriety for 14 years, as self-reported by him, in those 14 years, he's had some type of support system to help him do that. It's my understanding that he attended NA meetings prior to his license being reinstated and him being placed on probation. And during his probation, he's been under monitoring where he has to call in. He has to get drug tested. So those were systems in place to make sure that he maintains his sobriety. If his probation is terminated early, we have no systems in place. He has no system in place. So we don't know at this point what his reaction or what his conduct will be if there are not those systems, backup systems in place to help him maintain his sobriety. Additionally, it is very clear from all of this misconduct that the doctor does have some type of emotional and anger-related issues. And while I do commend him for working through these issues in therapy, again, he has no program or no plans in place to deal with these issues beyond his probation term. So him not having any plans in place, I think, shows a lack of seriousness in maintaining his reform, and it still places the public in danger, the fact that he does not have any plans in place beyond probation. So most importantly, we have to weigh his desire to get his license back, or not to get it back, but to have it free of any type of probation, and the interest of the public and protecting the public and public safety. I think probation needs to continue to make sure that female patients are protected and that the public is protected. Because even as the doctor's two witnesses at the hearing testified, that the doctor maintaining his sobriety is by far the most important, the most key thing in making sure that he stays reformed and that the public is protected. If he does not maintain his sobriety, the probation monitor said that she wasn't sure if he would be a threat to the public or not. So it is important for probation to continue so that we can monitor the doctor and make sure that he maintains his sobriety. So in closing, I would ask that this decision be modified and that the petition be denied. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Mr. Lear, your reply, please.
Thank you, and I apologize in advance for the trash truck that, of course, chose now to come by. That said, there has been, through the record of this matter, evidence of professionals, mental health professionals opining that Dr. Cosgrove is safe to practice and does not have a further need to be on probation. And I think the medical board is not being candid with respect to the evidence. One, we've already mentioned Ms. Dvorak of the medical board monitoring, probation monitoring, who opined clearly on pages 23 and 24 of the transcript that she has no hesitation in Dr. Cosgrove being off probation. But I think also it's important to look into the weeds in this case. In the trial in the 2014, August 2015 reinstatement hearing, there was evidence from a Dr. Christopher Tickner, who was a psychiatrist from Texas, who testified that he found no evidence to suggest that Dr. Cosgrove was a danger to the public, and basically released him from continuing psychological and psychiatric counseling. And I think that's compelling here in light of the argument being made by the medical board. Moreover, Dr. Kai McDonald, K-A-I McDonald, the psychiatrist who was appointed by the medical board and had to assess Dr. Cosgrove's psychological health, found that Dr. Cosgrove was safe to practice medicine with no additional restrictions or provisions, and that was in 2016. That's the medical board's own expert opinion, and that's documented by a letter on file with the medical board probation department in July of 2016. So to say that there's not any evidence, or that Judge Garrett made a speculative decision, it is just not consistent with what actually happened here. So this is not, as framed by the medical board, Dr. Cosgrove opining about himself that he's good to go and that he can self-discipline himself. That was a comment made by Dr. Cosgrove at the probation monitoring hearing that is buttressed and supported by mental health professionals that are throughout the record in this case. So this is not a Dr. Cosgrove that's gone rogue. There's plenty of backup for this. And so for all those reasons, we think that no, Dr. Cosgrove is not being naive. He understands the situation. Sorry about this. And that his attitude is good. He's worked hard to get to this point. His self-discipline is supported by the mental health professionals. Yes, we agree that the underlying misconduct was severe and inappropriate, but we're past that. That's not what this hearing is about. This hearing is about Dr. Cosgrove's rehabilitation. We believe he has checked all the boxes and asked that this panel uphold the decision of Judge Garrett. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lear. Mr. Roberts, your reply.
Thank you. Again, in summary, the nature and severity of these acts is egregious. This is the highest degree of moral turpitude. Public protection is of the utmost importance. It is the #1 priority of the board. And due to the nature and severity of these acts, and the fact that the respondent has not shown overwhelming proof of reform, has no plans in place to continue his reform other than his own self-discipline, the decision needs to be modified and the petition should be denied to protect public safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Dr. Cosgrove, you do have an opportunity to address the panel regarding penalty if you wish to do so. Do you wish to address the panel?
Yes, I would.
Okay, and so hang on one second. I need to place you under oath. So if you would raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide in this will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead and put your hand down whenever you're ready, sir.
Okay, well, I thank you for the opportunity to address the board, and obviously to the board, I want to thank for giving me the opportunity to practice medicine again. This is a huge opportunity that a lot of people had doubts that I would do well, and I think I've done very well. So thank you also to Mr. Lear for representing me. So since 2006, I've been, a model citizen. I've done everything I can to redeem myself. That was a dark period that Mr. Roberts talks about, where I was out of control. My behavior was, outrageous, but it was a very short period of time that was due to, I was not acting myself. So that's not my normal character. I was under the influence of drugs. I've addressed that issue, and I've been off drugs for 14 years. Yes, self-directed. And I think that's important to say that, it's not because people are watching over me that I'm off of drugs. I was off of drugs for 4 years before I even started the NA meetings. NA was helpful, but it also was something I had to do to document for the medical board. If I just came to the medical board and said, I'm fine, I've had no kind of counseling, I've done nothing like that, that would never be credible. So while I was off drugs for 4 years, I went to NA for another couple of years, and then I went to Physicians Health and Rehabilitation Group for a period of time. I was doing drug testing before I went to before I was required to, and I documented all of that for the medical board. And I've been drug testing ever since. And, it's reasonable that I would be drug tested during probation. That's fine. Mostly for me, it's just a way of showing that I'm not on drugs. It's not a way to keep me off of drugs. So, I hope the record's clear. I've been through a lot of rehabilitation, counseling, workshops, classes, boundaries, ethics. I have letters from all of those classes that show I participated and did very well at them in my participation. He says I haven't gone above and beyond, but it's not true. I've done a lot of volunteer work, and I go above and beyond every day. Every time I see a patient, I don't do the minimum. I do what's at the best for the patient. I have a lot to do besides the minimum in my daily work, and I do that. I reach out to caseworkers. I reach out to insurance companies. I have to reach out to other providers that I've referred patients to make sure that the process of workers' comp, which is a complicated process, set with a lot of glitches and delays, goes smoothly for the patient. I get a lot of satisfaction from being able to help patients. This is something that I get a lot of thank yous, a lot of feedback from patients saying, you've been really helpful. I really appreciate the extra work you've done. You've done a lot. And so all of these things, besides that, I counsel patients. I advise patients. All of this is not necessarily part of my minimum requirements, as Mr. Roberts would suggest. I have a spiritual connection that was reestablished after I went to my very low point in 2005 and 6. So that's a big strength for me. Obviously, we've documented that I've been practicing medicine for 4 years under some supervision, but a lot of it is without supervision, and I've done perfectly well with or without. PEP is a physician's education program out of UCSD, which is required to monitor my work. So Dr. Searles from UCSD takes a random selection of my charts and reviews them every month. And I see hundreds and hundreds of patients every month. So he's welcome to take any chart and at random. And he says that there's been absolutely no problems with any of my documentations or my standard of care. I've had no complaints from patients or from any law enforcement in any other regard. So, I love practicing, I love helping people, and I want to do more. I'm limited in what I can do because of the probation. I'm not allowed to have my own business, so I'm not allowed to be creative and, bring in different methods or modalities for helping the community, which I think I have a lot of plans to do.
Dr. Cosgrove, you hit the 5-minute mark, so if you would kindly bring your comments to a conclusion, sir.
I sure will. So we know I've been drug tested for 7 years and clean for 14 years. We have at least four counselors or psychiatrists, psychologists. Dr. Leffler is the psychologist I was seeing on probation. He recommended I don't even need to continue with my counseling. And the medical board agreed. So in February of 2020, they said, yeah, counseling's fine. You don't have to do that anymore. So even the medical board themselves has already agreed that I don't need counseling. So I've been reliable, fully compliant, a good clinician, a law-abiding citizen, drug-free, and a stable model citizen. So I'm eager to get back to regular work and continue that trend without any kind of monitoring. I think it's gone on long enough. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'll turn it to the panel to see if there are any questions. And since we're not together, what it might be easiest is for me just to go down the list. And then after I go down the list once, I'll double check to make sure new questions haven't popped up by anyone else, any of the other panel members. So first, Dr. Lewis.
Yes, I have two questions of Dr. Cosgrove. And they may be able to be rolled into one. So what the medical board looks for is commitment to their treatment programs. And by that, I mean a continued awareness that they had a problem. The problem needs continuous monitoring, and to demonstrate to us that you have taken this seriously. So when I look at the sobriety programs, I don't really see in there now, today, that you have made an effort to continue with AA or NA as you move forward, because although I'm not experiencing those programs, there are relapses years in the future. And also, I don't see evidence of really your own decision to maintain some psychotherapy, even if it's once a month. So I wonder where that went. And yeah, just because the medical board agrees you don't need this, you don't need that, it's your own person who says to yourself, God, I just need to keep doing this. You know, I just think that that is the healthiest thing for me to do. Could you respond to that, please?
Yes. Well, okay, so I did sort of already respond to that when I said that I had already stopped using drugs for 4 years before going to NA. So that was a period of time that was helpful, seeing other addicts talk about their problems. I related to it for a while, but I feel like I outgrew that. I already understand. I've come to terms with it. I've done a lot of self-reflection, and I get it. I'm totally aware of the consequences of drug use and substance abuse. I mean, who could be more aware than me? I mean, it completely destroyed my life, my career, almost destroyed my family. It destroyed my reputation. I'm pretty aware of the consequences of drug use. And if over this last 14 years, I wanted to sneak some in here and there, I could have, I'm sure, I guess. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the future. I'm interested in a clean life, a respectable life, and a successful resolution in the next 10, 20 years to my career. So do I need ongoing counseling? Well, I don't think so. And neither do any of the psychiatrists or psychologists who have, counseled me. They all agree. So I'm not a counselor in that regard, but we have 4 professional opinions that say I am adequately stable to go on without counseling. So I think that's significant. And no, I don't want to keep going to counseling for the rest of my life. And no, I don't want to keep going to drug classes for the rest of my life. I'm already at a point where I'm past that and I'm moving forward. And yes, I'm very safe to do that.
Okay, thank you for your response.
What was that now?
I said, thank you for your response to my question. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
your
All right.
candor.
Mhm.
Any further questions, Dr. Lewis?
No, no further questions from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Hawkins, any questions?
Yes. Thank you. May I proceed? So we're aware increasingly there's a physiopsychological basis for drug addiction and drug abuse. My question, Dr. Cosgrove, is do you ever have cravings for amphetamines? Current time, present.
No, not at all. In fact, the idea repels me. It gives me the creeps. When you're on amphetamines, you crave amphetamines, and once you're past it, I quit on my own. I didn't go do any kind of a program to cleanse my body or anything. I just quit because I hated it at the end of the use of it. Actually, by the time I quit, I was like very done with it, and it was just an impetus when I hit rock bottom and was arrested that I'm like, good God, I'm done with this for now, forever. And no, I've never wanted to go back. I have nightmares about using it. I wake up going, good God, I'm glad that was a dream, because I don't crave it. Not at all.
Thank you. No more questions.
Ms. Lubiano, any questions?
Yes, one question. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you well.
Thank you. I read in the briefings that one of the reasons that is driving your desire to terminate the probation conditions is your desire to be with your family and move to Texas. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on that a little bit. For example, is your intention to not practice in California again and move on up to Texas if the restrictions are lifted?
Well, yeah, I want to get back with my family because I feel like I've missed a big piece of their life, right? So during the period of time I was on drugs, I was missing some of their life. I mean, I was there for them, but not in the same way I could have been. And then after that, I've been tied up with this whole procedure for 14 years. Meanwhile, my kids have grown, gone on to college, graduated college. My son's in medical school. So yeah, I would like to get back with my family. My wife is in Texas. She has a good paying job. She's unable to come out here and work because of that. She's like, doesn't want to give up a good career. So yeah, what we will do after I'm off probation is not 100% clear. We all make plans, but do we stick to them or do we change our plans? My plan right now would be to continue working in California for probably 6 months or so until I'm able to establish, some opportunities to be able to transfer. I have to sell my house, quit my job, give notice, find a new job, get a license in Texas. But yes, eventually we think Texas would be a better place for us. I'm a lot more mobile than my wife is, so that makes sense for me to move than she. And I think that's what we'll probably plan to do.
Got it. Thank you. No further questions.
Okay, Mr. Warmoth, any questions?
Yes. I think when, at least for my part, when we decide on a period of probation, it's not the amount of time that we think it's going to take to accomplish all the rest of the terms and conditions. It's the amount of time we think it's legitimate that we need to monitor someone. And I understand that there is reason to shorten that, but for me, needs to be going above and beyond meeting the limit, the bare minimum requirements of probation. You mentioned earlier about doing some volunteer work. Could you speak a little bit more about what type of volunteer work you're doing and the extent of it?
Okay. Yeah, I've done all kinds of different things. I worked at the food bank in New Braunfels, Texas for a period of time. The NA meetings was volunteer work because I became a leader in the group of the regional and of our independent meeting place. And, you know, I try to connect, I work at, have helped at the church. I've done some Sunday school teaching, you know, where you, you know, sort of like a substitute. I'm not like a full-time teacher there, but I've been there for the church, for the children. And, you know, when you say doing the bare minimum, I have to comment that the bare minimum in this case is a lot. There's this is a lot of elements to this probation, and keeping up with all of it has already, I mean, I'm not saying that I shouldn't do more, and I always will do more, but to minimize the extent of what the probation is requiring of me, I think is understating. So yeah, I've done various, you know, community service things, but right now what I'm doing is focusing on my work. And so I mostly work about 50 hours a week at the clinic, and I just try to take care of my spiritual life and my physical health. That's really what I'm doing in the last few months.
Okay, thank you. I did not intend to minimize the amount of work that we are requiring of you.
Yeah.
All I can say about that is that it is based on what we thought the seriousness of the original problems.
Oh, absolutely. I understand.
But I appreciate your comments. Thank you. That's all.
Oh, thank you. Mm-hmm.
Hey, Mr. Watkins, any questions?
Good morning, TJ Watkins here. Good morning, Mr. Cosgrove.
Good morning.
I've got 4 questions that I have that jumped out at me as I was preparing for this meeting. And the first was that this accusation was filed in 2007, right?
Yes.
You were in 2006, and you surrendered in 2008 your license.
Correct.
You surrendered it. You didn't wait for the board to take proceedings.
Right.
And then in 2008, and in 2011, you filed for reinstatement.
Yes.
You strike me as very confident. So here's my question: do you think you were ready to be back practicing as a doctor in 2011 already?
You know what? At the time, I thought it was going to be some struggle, but I was ready. I would have had some learning and some developing to do. But now, 9 years later, I am confident. I am already practicing and doing well. So yeah, at that time, I could have done it, and there would have been a learning curve to get back on my feet. But in 2020, we've already gone through that learning curve under the supervision and on probation, and I'm fully confident now.
So here's my second question. As a leader in Narcotics Anonymous, there is 12 steps, right?
Right.
Can you tell me what's your favorite step? And also, specifically, what have you done with step number 8?
No, I can't tell you specifically what I've done with step number 8 because it's been several years since I've been to that and I don't have them all aligned in front of me, but I might be able to if I had them listed. But
No worries.
yeah, my favorite is my favorite step basically is to give up your power to a higher power, give up yourself to a higher power and admit that you've got a problem and you need help. And also to share with other people what you've done and how to learn from that. And so that's what I've done. And at that time, I had 2 other NA participants who asked me to be their mentor, and I was happy to do that. And they did well as well, as far as I remember now. I mean, it's been 5 years. I haven't been back to those meetings because they were in Texas, but.
So the number 8 was to make a list of all persons we have harmed and become willing to make amends to them all. So here's my 3rd and 4th question. I'm going to make it different. We've all talked about your addiction, and we've played a lot of emphasis on that as a cause for behavior, right?
Yeah.
The behavior was a sexually driven violence against women behavior. So here's my question. What have you done? What have you learned to demonstrate to myself what you have learned, the triggers for that behavior? And if you and it's not just the methamphetamines, it's not just the drugs, because a lot of people do drugs and then they don't go beating up women or exhibiting behavior, violence against women. So what have you learned in all of this time? You speak about how great you've done on your rehabilitation, how you've done everything, and with such confidence that it almost makes me red flag it. So what have you done? What is the discoveries that you've made about yourself that drove those behaviors?
So what have I done to discover in myself the reasons for my behaviors? Well, you know, I think I've gone to a lot of counseling and discussed that with my counselors. And so that has been something I've done. And I've looked back on my life to see where did this come from. And, you know, it's hard to say because I was always a calm and a nice kid growing up. I was always a normal student growing up and through college. And then not until I got on to methamphetamines did this erratic behavior come out. Some of it, I think, was a result of the frustration that, you know, so methamphetamines do have a sexual component. They drive people to be hypersexual. This is well documented in the literature. This is well documented in, in gay communities. A lot of people will go to these, you know, they have their activities and it's meth driven. So yeah, there's a hypersexuality associated with methamphetamines. And during that time, my judgment wasn't good. So when patients would be flirtatious or admiring of me, I would suck that up. And then when they would make advances, I would be, you know, with my poor judgment, I'm like, okay, there's something I could do with my hypersexual, you know, nature at that time. And then so, you know, one thing would lead to another, and I would end up having this relationship with a patient. And this happened on 3 occasions. But, you know, once you're there and then they start talking about trapping you, reporting you, you become panicked, you become frustrated. And with the amphetamine high and the poor judgment already, you're like a trapped, you know, animal or whatever. I kind of overreacted, obviously, and freaked out without any feeling for an escape or a rational way to deal with the situation because I had already dug myself in. So, I mean, do I have an explanation other than a panic reaction? Not really. I haven't been violent before. I was never violent after. those are just one incident with each person, and that was the end of the situation. So I don't have a history or a pattern of being violent with women. I've been with my wife for 33 years, and I have no history of violence with her. I mean, we have a wonderful relationship. This is my, my first bride from 20 years old. We've been together through all of this, thick and thin. And there's obviously in any relationship, there's going to be some hard times. But I've never had any violence towards any other women. So I don't really agree that I have a propensity for violence towards women at all. I mean, I've dealt with that. I mean, that was something that happened in a very short period of time, 14 years ago, 15 years ago, and it hasn't happened since. There hasn't been any propensity toward that for a decade and a half. That's a pretty good track record. That's all I have.
Mr. Watkins, do you have any further questions?
Mr. Watkins, you're back on mute. Go ahead and unmute.
So here's my final question. My final question is, so the fact that you are not in Narcotics Anonymous, that you're giving up therapy because everybody says that you are ready to go and you feel that you are ready to go. And yet the thing that you cannot explain to us is that the drug addiction, that you fell into it, that you don't understand how that happened, but when you fell into it, it turned violent. That risk has not been mitigated to me personally, and unless you have a really good insight into it. I'm genuinely wanting to understand your insight about what drove this behavior, and now removing all the obstacles. It's like an athlete, we stop training and then we wonder why we become unfit, and that's what you're suggesting. So that's my final question. Thank you.
Okay, I didn't recognize that as a question. Can I have the gist of the question? I didn't quite catch what the question part of that was.
The question part of it is removing, saying, I don't want to be accountable. I don't want to continue the sobriety. I don't want to do any of that, right?
Yeah.
Is what I understood you saying up to now. My question is, if we remove that and you still do not understand what dropped you into the narcotics use that resulted in the violence, that creates a immediate concern for me. So if you can explain that, that's the question.
So we're going to go into my psychological history from my childhood up until 40 years old. It's going to take a little while, but we can try. I was raised by a single mother in a family in Orange County, California, where my father would carry a gun. He was a motorcycle guy.
Excuse me, this is Dr. Lewis. I'm going to have to interrupt just a second. Sean, can I have a time check, please?
We're at 9:35. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, and how much more do we have for this session?
We are already, we have 10 minutes left till we are scheduled to go into the open session for the second case, but we've not yet deliberated.
Okay, so panel members, just please keep track of that time because those attendees on the outside will be allowed back in. And we haven't even finished question and answer period, nor have we had
Dr.
Okay?
Dr. Lewis, we haven't gone into closed session, so no one's been removed from the meeting. Before we go into closed session and excuse the attendees, we will, calculate a time from that period. But yes, we do have a full agenda, and we started a little late, but we're running a little over. So.
Okay, so sorry, that's my point. I just want to make sure of the time since we have a tight schedule. So go ahead, Dr. Cosgrove, continue. Sorry for interruption.
Okay, so I grew up with a single mother and 2 older sisters and 2 older brothers that were out. My older brothers had moved out by the time I was 8 years old, because I was the youngest. And so I was raised, my 2 sisters dropped out of high school and both became pregnant. My mother was a school teacher who wasn't, school teachers back in the 70s didn't make a lot of money. Maybe they still don't. My father didn't pay child support. So the people in my life, my role models, used drugs. My brother dealt drugs for a while. This was my environment growing up. So where did my history of my frame of reference for drug use come from? I think that tells where that came from. I dropped out of high school. I went back to night school. I got my GED. I got my diploma. I went to junior college for several years. I went to the university. I finally decided I'd go to medical school. I went to 2 more years of classes. I got straight A's. I was very dedicated. All this time, I'm a changing person, right? So I went from this kid who dropped out of high school with long hair, smoking pot, to a time when I'm a serious college student, a serious medical student. I was married at this time. I had children. And I was well into just starting my career. I was all credentialed and ready to go. I was feeling proud of myself. I was feeling pretty high on my accomplishments, having gone through where I came from to where I was. And I thought some hedonism. I relaxed. I lost my way. I rejected my spiritual upbringing. I was an atheist for a while. I thought I had it all. It was on me, and I knew how to live, and I was going to live it up. And that was after about 12 years of marriage. So, I was looking for some adventure with in my life, and we started using pot again. We started meeting people who brought amphetamines into the house. It was insane. It was like it was like a movie, but it was terrible because it was me. And after things started rolling and were out of control, the pieces started falling on me. So, and that's when I had to, and then, people are making accusations of me. I'm getting in trouble. I'm getting caught. I'm getting exposed. It was terrible. So I hit bottom and I reestablished myself in terms of how did I get here? Why did this happen? Who am I? Where am I going? All of that is in my history now. I'm 56 years old now. And so I'm not the same person I was when I was, 15, 25, 35, or even 40. I've learned from my past. I've developed, I've matured, I've moved forward, and I've moved on. I mean, I'm pretty self-aware now. And if you say I seem very confident and that's a red flag, what would be a worse red flag? Being unconfident and being, so I'm confident. I feel like I'm very ready to go. I'm strong in this. I counsel people in lifestyle. I counsel people in approach to problems. It's what I do every day. So I have a lot to say to patients because of my own history. If I had never gone through that, maybe I wouldn't know what I was talking about. But I feel like I do know what I'm talking about now just because of the trials and the things I've been through. I'm a different person. So moving forward, I'm pretty confident I can stay out of harm's way. I've seen what it does.
Dr. Yip, do you have any questions?
Yes. I have a 2.5 question, half already touched by Mr. Watkins about the violent behavior. Just a quick answer would be good, Dr. Cosgrove. When was the last time you had some type of anger management counseling or psychotherapy regarding the anger in the past or now?
Well, my anger issues were 15 years ago, and I haven't had any anger issues since then. So I haven't had any specific anger management classes. I didn't have any before applying for my license reinstatement, and I haven't had any since. But I haven't had.
That'd be fine. That'd be great. So, second question is that have you tried to apply for the license in Texas at all? My understanding, you can still apply. They may put you in probation like California. Have you tried to apply and denied it, or have you ever even start trying the application process?
I inquired about the application process prior to being reinstated, but not since then. At the time, I was told there's no way they're going to give me a license until I resolve my issues with California. So I proceeded to request a reinstatement, and I went through all the steps that were required to do that, and I haven't checked back with them until I'm off of probation. I will reapply at that time.
And the third question, before the third question, I want to congratulate you on being able to turn your life around. I think you should be proud of yourself. The third question is that listening to all the board members today, one of the major concerns is how would you move forward with stress ahead, moving and getting new license, etc., to deal with the stress factor that you may have problem with drugs or behavior again. Would you plan on whatever the outcome today that you're going to engage yourself in some type of activity like an NA and a psychotherapy on a regular basis just to make sure you don't turn back dark days?
No, I wouldn't be interested in that. The reason is because if I was living on the edge and I felt like I had a problem with drugs anymore, if I felt like I turned to drugs for stress, then I might do that. But I don't turn to drugs for stress. I turn to exercise. I turn to God. I turn to my family. I turn to my support group, which is my friends and the medical community, other doctors. There will be some stress, but I'm used to stress. I go through stress all the time. This whole process has been stress. I'm steel forged. I'm iron forged into steel now. I'm not about to crack under the weight of having to sell my house or find a new job. Those are pretty low-level stressors compared to what I've been through. So I think I've held up pretty well for 15 years. I can handle.
Great. Thank you. No further questions. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, any further questions from any of the panel members? All right, hearing none, this concludes oral arguments. And so the record is closed in this matter. The matter is submitted, and we are off the record. So before I turn it back to Dr. Lewis for closed session, I've just let the parties know. As you know, if we were in a regular hearing, we'd be doing the court reporter form, and I would hand those out. What will happen is after all the hearings, I'll get the information from the court reporter, prepare the forms, and then my office will mail them out to the parties. So you will get them, it just won't be right now. All right, so Dr. Lewis, I'll turn it back to you for closed session.
Okay, thank you, Judge Wong. We'll now go into closed session once Sean gives me the word that the other attendees have been removed from the link.
Yes, please give me just a moment. I am removing everybody that was a participant in the first case. I'll take just 1 second here.
Anybody needs to do a quick break, this is a good time.
Okay, and for all of the attendees that have joined up, at this point we are going to go into closed session. I have the time as 9:46. We're going to allot about 5 minutes for some housekeeping and then an additional 30 minutes. So we will make the return time for this first session, let's call it 10:20 a.m. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and remove all of the attendees. Attendees, please remember that at 10:20 a.m., you'll be able to return into the meeting using the same link that you used from the agenda, and we will be sure to have the meeting back open at that point. So I will be excusing everyone now so we can go into closed session. Thank you. See you at 10:20.